Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another episode of the strategy series. Today I'm going to help you guys figure out how to determine whether or not a card is good or bad competitively. If you guys want to play this game in the most competitive sense, it's very important to figure this out. Sometimes it's very obvious and smacks you in the face whether or not a card is good or bad, but sometimes there's nuance, and we'll go over examples in the video of all that. But if you're new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. And if you guys want to help support the channel and want even more competitive content, go check out the Patreon, where I've actually posted breakdowns per archetype talking about their competitive viability, all except for green, because spoiler, the green cards in set 15 in my opinion are very bad. But anyways, we're gonna get into this video. So everything I say here, not everything is going to be like 100% concrete, 100% accurate all the time. Again, it is very contextual whether or not a card is good or bad, and this is more so going to be from a vacuum perspective. So evaluating cards mostly on their own. We will talk about some scenarios where cards have to work together to operate, because some cards are just like that, but this is mostly going to be like a vacuum perspective, and things will change contextually again, which we'll cover. So firstly, I want to talk about what makes a card good. Now this I think is more easy to identify, and we'll talk about what makes a card bad later on. I think that's the more difficult part. But anyways, what makes a card good? So replacing itself and being low cost are both very good starting points for a card to be good. And again, we'll go over examples in a bit, but that's a really good place to start. A versatile and a consistently good card, this is almost like the same thing. So being consistently good means that this card is good in 99% of situations. It's good at pretty much all stages of the game, whether it's early game, late game, mid game. And then versatile means that the card has applications in many different scenarios, not just at certain stages of the game, but in certain situations, whether you need like maybe your piece of removal, maybe an aggressive tool, maybe a controlling counterplay, something like that. Having removal built into a card is also a very good indicator of that card being solid, and the card being uniquely strong. So a little bit opposite of the versatile thing. The uniquely strong part, maybe it only fits a very specific niche, but it fills that role very well. So this could be something like a boss monster, for example. Boss monsters that do uniquely powerful things that help you win the game. That's where this can kind of fit in. And of course, there are some more points as to what can make a card good. Again, it can all be contextual, and you have to evaluate each card on a case-by-case basis. But I feel like this is a pretty good place to start from. So again, I do have a few examples. So if we were going off of like a 10-point scale, Baby Hachiyak and Supreme Kai of Time would be 11s. Like, these cards are pretty much broken. Like, they're so incredibly strong. That's pretty much the point of an SCR in Dragon Ball Super, though. They're meant to be just like a one-time insane powerful play. So Baby Hachiyak, for example, right? Very low cost. It costs 0 energy and only costs 1 card out of your hand. Then you have it just being consistently good. Like, stopping your opponent from attacking you, period, is good at any point in the game, turn 3 and beyond, which is when Baby Hachiyak goes live. Doesn't offer removal, but that's okay. It is also still uniquely strong because there are not many cards in the game that just outright say your opponent is done attacking for the turn. And this is actually pretty much the only card of its type that literally stops every attack. Of course, there are cards like Nimbus, Dormant Potential, stuff like that, but Baby Hachiyak is super uniquely strong. Supreme Kai of Time pretty much hits all of these marks, right? So it's super low cost. It doesn't exactly replace itself by drawing a card, but you remove so many of your opponent's cards that this is gonna pay for itself in that same sense. It's very versatile in the sense that it helps you remove unisons, which is actually really hard to do, just straight up spot remove a unison. It's consistently good because, again, at any point in the game it's good for the removal, or even just for being a 40k one-drop attacker. It offers you that removal, and of course it is uniquely strong again because it helps you deal with unisons, which is not the easiest thing to do in the game as far as just straight up spot removing them goes. So again, these cards would be 11 on the scale, but we have some cards that are still really good that I want to talk about as examples. And the first one is Turles All Too Easy. So I talk about this a lot in a lot of different content, in articles and in videos. Basically, once set 15 drops, if you're playing a yellow sand leader, this should be a 3 of in your deck at the least. This card is that insane. So going over itself, it is very low cost, so it costs 2 as long as you have 3 or more energy and your leader's a mono yellow sand, and it replaces itself, or at least can replace itself, because you can draw a card when you play it, or you can pop 2 battle cards, which offers you removal and makes it relatively uniquely strong. Now, granted, it's not entirely unique. Like, yellow used to have bigger problems with removal like 3 or 4 sets ago. Lately, though, yellow's been getting a lot of removal for rest mode. You have Trunks Altering the Future Unison, you have Frieza Divine Presence, and now you have Turles All Too Easy and Dragon Fist right here, which we'll talk about in just a second. But yeah, this card is just so overall good that you should absolutely be playing it if you're playing a Yellow Saiyan leader. And there are many other cards of this, right? Like in blue, for example, you have Golden Avenger, which is a high cost card, but still it's uniquely strong in the sense of the counter, and counter play. It's versatile and consistently good because counter is a pretty uniquely strong thing that allows you to push for game, and it does replace itself by drawing. Doesn't exactly have a low cost, but it can be used for free in tandem with baby unknown parasite unison, right? So that's pretty good. Goku Return of the Dragon Fist is a more unique example I wanted to talk about because this card is insanely good. Like, it's certainly uniquely strong in the sense of its activate main Spirit Boost 2. Your opponent can't use skills on battle cards cost 7 or less during his attacks. That is a very, very powerful skill, yet this card does not see a lot of play in yellow decks. It's also got low cost, and it can pay for itself by removing 2 battle cards, and it offers you removal. It's versatile, but it's not consistently good. And the reason this card is not consistently good is because yellow unisons are not consistently good. Yellow has quite possibly the least tankiest unisons of all the colors, meaning that they're relatively easily removed from the board because they don't gain markers too many times per turn, or they don't have super high attack power, stuff like that. Yellow unisons just generally are pretty easy to remove, and they don't have the biggest payoff for playing them, so yellow unisons aren't always the most important part of deck building when building a yellow deck, let's just say. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why Dragon Fist, even though I think this card is absolutely incredible, doesn't see so much play, because it's not consistently good. And that's just because, again, yellow unisons are pretty tough to land and tough to justify playing. So that's where I want to bring up an example of this card being a very, very high power card, but just not really consistent enough to be considered as good, in my opinion, as Turles All Too Easy. Again, their effects very, very on par. The Spirit Boost does make Dragon Fist better than Turles, but the ease of which you can play the card makes Turles better 100%. That's definitely how that works. But anyways, we're gonna get into what makes a card bad, but real quick, we're gonna take a word from today's video sponsor. Dragon Ballers, real quick before we get into today's video, just want to share something with you guys that I am very excited about. PPG is going to be hosting the Pro Support TCG weekend in Dallas, Texas, the weekend of November 6th. It's going to be a giant TCG convention weekend hosting all your favorite games, obviously Dragon Ball Super, Digimon, Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, and more. Tournaments for all those. I'm actually going to be there commentating the Dragon Ball Super side of things, the main event on Saturday, the side events on Sunday. I absolutely cannot wait. And if you guys missed out on Gen Con or heard me talk about how much fun that was, you're 110% going to want to be at the Pro Support TCG weekend. The other great thing too is it's just 2 weeks before Nationals, the biggest Dragon Ball Super tournament of the year, so you can get some invaluable practice there. But besides that, it's a convention. It's going to be so much fun, especially for those of you guys like me that just absolutely love trading card games. Definitely check it out. The link to sign up will be in the description. I really hope to see you guys there. Now let's get into the video. Alright guys, I do hope to see you at the Pro Support TCG weekend, and hopefully this video helps you narrow down your deck building for a competitive event like that. But anyways, let's talk about what makes a card bad. And I think this is, again, a bit tougher for players to identify at first glance. So if a card is overcosted, so what that kind of means is if a card costs too much for what you're getting out of it, or if a card isn't giving you enough payoff for how much you're paying for it. That could be energy cost, that could be hand cost if it costs like discards, for example. And that also does kind of fall in line with it being outclassed or power crept. So let's just say, you know, for Turles All Too Easy, let's just say there was some card that costed 4 energy to pop 2 rest moded battle cards. Well, Turles All Too Easy comes in and just immediately power creeps that card, because now you can do the same thing for 2 energy as opposed to 4 energy. So you do want to look at cards and say, is there a card that does this better? That could make the card you're evaluating bad per se, at least in this specific deck or color that you're building, right? Too narrow in usage is pretty opposite of what we talked about with cards being versatile. Does this card only do one thing in one very specific situation? If that's the case, maybe that card's better off in the side deck, or maybe that card's just not applicable to the meta you're building for. Does the card require your opponent to do something? This is very, very important. There are a lot of really like flashy cards that have really cool seeming effects, but if they require your opponent to fall into the trap, or they require your opponent to do something, oftentimes those cards can be very, very ineffective. Just a quick example that kind of is an exception that proves the rule: counterattacks, right? They require your opponent to do something to use them. They require your opponent to attack to use them, but attacking is such a vital part of the Dragon Ball Super card game that they're still going to be really, really good cards. Counterattacks are still going to be very, very vital. But let's take another card, for example, Mutaito, Skill of a Sage, where this card has been historically good in the past, but you have to really look at the card and say, is my opponent, or are the other meta decks playing battle cards that are higher cost than their actual energy, and would putting that card in rest mode upon play really serve a valid purpose? Like, Mutaito has been played in quite a few formats, and that's probably because it's probably been outclassed in power creep, but you also do have to evaluate, you know, how good is this specific card in this meta. Even though it requires my opponent to do something, it requires them to play a battle card, which is, again, something that happens commonly throughout the game, but with these specific usages on Mutaito, is this relevant? That's what you kind of have to ask yourself. And then the other thing is requiring another card to work. So again, we talked about Dragon Fist, where that's one of the things that makes Dragon Fist bad in the context of the current metagame, because Yellow Unison just aren't all of that. So you really don't want cards to require other cards to work unless they are really, really strong in tandem. So the first example I want to talk about is Vegeta Destined Confrontation. This whole kind of discussion came up when I was doing the set review, or the card review, for the Vegeta archetype, and I don't think it's very good. And the main reason I don't think it's very good is because auto once per turn fits your opponent's turn, so that narrows its usage even more, because it has to be during your opponent's turn specifically. When one of your battle cards is removed from your battle area by an opponent's skill, you draw one card, then your opponent discards a card. So that is so specific in its application, both how it has to trigger and when it can trigger. And it also requires your opponent to do something, which they do not have to do at any point in the game to play the game. They never at any point have to remove your battle cards to play. Maybe it can be advantageous for them to remove your Great Ape if it's going to block an attack, or if it's the Vegeta Great Ape that's going to continue to attack and take cards out of your hand, that can be valuable. But they don't have to do that if they want to play around your leader's skill and prevent you from drawing cards and discarding cards out of their hand. So that's my main point with that. And then we have Kaioken Son Goku Decisive Battle, which is a card that I really want to like, but it's way too overcosted. So Deflect, Double Strike, Barrier, Dual Attack, incredible stats. EX Evolve for 3. If your opponent has 3 or more energy, it goes over a mono green Son Goku with an energy cost of 2 or 3. So it's restricted to when you can play it and how you can evolve it, but we've seen cards like this in the past that are usually not too bad when they tell you a certain turn you can play them on, and that's okay. The Deflect, Double Strike, Barrier, Dual Attack, again, all incredible. Auto, when this card's played, choose up to 2 of your opponent's battle cards, ignoring Barrier, and KO them. Then your leader card and Son Goku cards in your battle area get minus 10,000 power during your opponent's next turn. So you get a really powerful removal effect. KOing 2 things ignoring Barrier is very strong, but then your leader and all Goku cards you control get minus 10,000 power during the next turn. So your leader is going to be very vulnerable to being attacked on that next turn. Now, if that was the only drawback to the card, I would be pretty ready to say this card's relatively good. Not the best green card ever, but a pretty solid one. But the next auto really gets me. So at the end of your turn, send this card to the owner's warp. If you do, play up to 1 Son Goku confronting invasion from your warp. So you invested the 3 energy. Yes, you got to kill 2 battle cards, but your leader is getting minus 10k the next turn, and you're losing this big beefy threat. So that altogether just tells me this card is way overcosted and does not have enough upside compared to its downside. So that's how I'd evaluate this card as being relatively bad. But there are a few more examples I want to go through. So I wanted to talk about Flying Nimbus versus Forbidden Power, because this is a case of, you know, theoretical power creep, where Forbidden Power is looked at as more of an updated version of Nimbus, but I don't necessarily think that Forbidden Power is straight up better than Nimbus. Here's why. So Forbidden Power, firstly, your leader has to be yellow, which isn't too big of a deal, but that is something to consider. And then it says your opponent can only attack with battle cards 1 more time for the turn. So very similar to Nimbus, except you don't discard a card to inflict that same floodgate upon your opponent. But what's important to realize is Nimbus actually stops the attack you use it on, as where Forbidden Power does not. So you can look at it like this. Flying Nimbus, yes, you pay 1 more card, but you stop the attack you're using it on, as opposed to Forbidden Power, where that attack is still going to go to the combo step and you still have to deal with that attack, and that might still cost you cards to deal with that attack, right? Now, Forbidden Power, the activate battle, I do like that on the card. It does add another upside compared to Nimbus, so that gives it a very legitimate reason to be considered. But if you're looking at purely the floodgate effects, I think I would actually go with Nimbus over Forbidden Power, because I want to pay that one extra card to actually stop the attack that I'm responding to in Nimbus. That's what I would want to do personally, I think, in most scenarios. So that's just an example of where I think Forbidden Power is still a good card, but doesn't directly automatically power creep Flying Nimbus, if you're following what I'm saying. Next up, I want to talk about Son Goku The Adventure Begins, and this goes more in line with cards relying on other cards to be good. A 3-drop 30k back in the set 6 Days of Dragon Ball wasn't absolutely a terrible card, but you wouldn't catch any meta deck playing these until Son Goku The Adventure Begins came out. Once you had a card that could cheat these things out for 2 energy, this was just a value powerhouse. Nowadays, we don't really see Kid Goku being played all that much, although Adventure Begins is still played in some black decks like Hachiyak because of its ability to add a 4-star ball, which is basically just a 5k combo from your deck or drop area to your hand every turn. People aren't really using the 2 energy play a skillless effect anymore, but the fact that Son Goku The Adventure Begins still adds you a card to your hand every single turn that you could charge, you could pitch for an effect, you can combo it, and then pick it back up, this is still a pretty good value engine. But I kind of just wanted to point this out as an example of cards that rely on other cards to work, but also cards that rely on other cards to be good. Like back then, 3-drop 30k skillless battle cards were threatening. They were a force to be reckoned with. But that was pretty much because of Son Goku The Adventure Begins. And the final example I want to talk about is Galactic Buster, which you can't play Galactic Buster without cards in your energy to combo with, right? So this is a card that cannot work unless you have other cards to make it work. This card was deemed strong enough by Bandai that it needed to be errated to bring its power level and generic usability down, right? So the thing with Galactic Buster is the payoff is so high that it's perfectly fine that it requires other cards to work. Like, think about this with Bojack the Evildoer. Basically, for 0 energy, you get to draw cards. So you're basically replacing the card itself, and you're comboing with Bojack out of your energy for 0. You're still replacing that energy, and then you can resolve the 2 energy effect of Bojack to come and play, or remove a card and attack for a 20k dual attack. So that's an example where the card completely relies on another card, but it's still very, very good. So overall, guys, that's what I have for you today. I hope this video helps you kind of identify cards that are good or bad in a competitive sense. I feel like there are some things I can maybe expand upon in maybe a second video, a part 2 or so. But anyways, let me know anything in the comments below. If you guys want me to talk more about this kind of stuff, let me know. If you guys like the video or dislike the video, let me know. I'll see you guys next time.